Hello and welcome to another video from me, Rough Swordsman Wargamer. The game we're playing through today is The Great Crisis of Frederick II by Tetsuya Nakamura from Vuca Simulations. I don't know much about this part of history, but what I do know is it wasn't just confined to Europe, which this game is concerned with. It was, in fact, some people say, the First World War. The Brits and the French were fighting in America and India, as well as Europe. But as I say, this concentrates on Frederick II's battles in Europe. So before we do anything else, let's have a quick look at the counters. So here you can see some of the counters. Here are the Prussians and the Austrians. And there's Frederick himself. Now you can see they're pretty sort of simple looking counters. There are no numbers or anything on them because this game uses a sort of to-hit combat system where 6 is the magic number. And when a unit does get hit, it gets reduced, and it's easy to distinguish the two because you've got this red line going through and only one chap here as opposed to the 3 here. It's the same with the leaders, the red line, but their stats stay the same. And as you'll see as we go along, you've got 2 numbers here. Top number is its tactical rating, which gives a die roll bonus to each unit, and the bottom one is the leadership value, which tells you how many units, including itself, it can use this modifier for. So that's about it, really. Good looking, clear counters, each nation with its own sort of colour combinations. So a quick look at the board. As you can see, it's a point-to-point map, and there are 2 basic types of spaces. You've got cities and forts, like here, or resource cities, like Berlin. As I say, there's also forts, so you have normal forts and the more sort of embellished resource forts. The idea of the game is for the alliances to battle against each other and control these resource spaces. Here over on the left side of the map, as we look at it, you can see the resource spaces track, and this is set up ready, and this corresponds, these counters correspond to the amount of resource spaces that nation controls. And the idea is for the Austrian alliance to try and get the Prussian alliance down to 8 or 9 resource spaces, 9 if the Austrian alliance control Berlin. And the Prussian alliance have to get up here by controlling 16 resource spaces. The game uses a chip pool mechanism to activate the alliances and nations, and as you can see at the start of the game, they are put onto the turn track. Interestingly, for the first turn, only the 2 Prussian counters are put into the cup, so they're the only nation that will get a go in the first turn. This is can be a long game. There are up to 45 turns, so I'm not sure if we can video the whole 7 years war, but we'll see how we go. This video is to give you a sort of overview of how the game works. Up here you can see 2 decks of cards, and these are drawn when certain conditions are met and will help either the Austrian or Prussian alliance. Around the edge of the board we have the nations represented, and over here is Russia, and this is where we keep our commander reserves and our unit reserves. If units or men are reduced and eliminated. They go back onto the unit reserve to maybe come on later on in the game. Unfortunately, if a commander gets depleted, as it's called in this game, turned over, and is then eliminated, it's eliminated for good and goes up to the removed from play section here. There are 3 off-board spaces here. We've got one for Great Britain, Hanover, one for Sweden, and one for Russia. And these sort of represent the bits of the map that you can't see. Obviously England's off here somewhere across the water. And Sweden and Russia is over there, miles away. So these represent units that can move onto the board from these off-map boxes. These two, though, have sort of blue dashed lines, which means they have to travel onto the main map across the sea, and as such can only move 1 unit at a time from the box onto the map. Whereas the Russians, a land base, they can move their normal amount, which we'll go into as we get going. The game is set up and ready to go, and the rules explain that very nicely. There's an actual setup map along with the setup information here where you place all the units, where you place them, and here where you put the resource space markers on the track. There is one slight errata which I have notified Patrick at Vuca Simulations about. Here it says, you can see this is the Austrian resource marker chit, and it's placed on the 8 space, but it should actually be placed on the 5 track. But that's it. That's a very little thing. Just bear that in mind. Right, let's get going. Before we start, just want to bring to your attention this, which is an errata and clarifications sheet put out by Vuca Simulations, available from their website, which does give clarifications to some of the rules and a couple of important changes. Just to let you know, in case you don't, we have the Prussian and Austrian alliances. The Prussian alliance consists of Prussia and Great Britain and Hanover, while the Austrian alliance is of course Austria and includes the nations of Saxony, which is sort of dotted over here, Sweden up the top, and the Holy Roman Empire. They're aided and abetted by the French, and later on in the game the Russians will make an entrance. So, as I say, this is a chit pull game, and nations that are pulled from the cup are activated and roll for action points to do their phase. So, as I said earlier, for the first turn, the only 2 counters that go into the cup are the 2 Prussian counters. So we'll put those in the cup. Move the game turn counter to turn 1. Draw the first chit, which of course is going to be Prussia. And then we follow through what they call their procedure of phase, which can be found on the back of the rule book. So the first thing it says is to check their LOC network and marks isolation. What's LOC? LOC is lines of communication, and that means every unit that is activated must be able to trace back an unbroken line of spaces that they control back to a resource point. If you remember, resource spaces are either forts or cities. Berlin is the only one on the map. At the beginning of the game, all units can trace back lines of communication, but as the game gets more sort of cluttered, then lines of communication may be cut, and if that happens, those units are isolated and can't do as much. So for now, lines of communication are okay. Next, determine their action points. This is done by throwing a d6, but in the case of Prussia, they are the only nation that can add 2 to their roll. So let's see what they get. Oh, straight away. 6 plus 2, 8 action points, which we mark on the track here. So what can you do with action points? Well, you can move, or march as it's called in this game. You can continue a siege, which hopefully we'll see a bit later on. You can recover depleted units. Remember, depleted units are those that have been sort of turned over to their other side with the red stripe, and they can't actually participate in battles. And retreat from a battle. So we've got 8 action points. So I think what we'll do is, I think historically the Prussians attacked Saxony first. So as they're the nearest, we've got a couple of Saxony units up here. I think we'll move towards those. Now remember, there are no stacking limits in this game, but you can only move a maximum of 8 units, including their commander, per action point along sort of land lines. Remember, we have these off-board or off-map boxes, and a couple of them have these blue lines, which means they're coming by sea, so we can only move 1 unit per action point. So I think we'll move Leopold down here for 1 action point. You can move 1 space per action point unless you control all the hexes, and you can actually then move 2 spaces per action point. So that's 1 action point, which will adjust. Next, I think we'll move down here from Magdeburg, Bevern, down to Torgau. Excuse me about my pronunciations of these places. Torgau. That's another action point, and while we're here, we'll move Freddy himself down to Leipzig. These are full stacks of 8, including their commanders. So that's 2, 1, 2. We've got 5 action points left. Now here, I think we'll move down Moritz. We can move 2 spaces for our 1 action point because we control these 2 spaces. So we're going to move down 1, 2. We're going to pop that on there to make that a bigger stack. Now bear in mind, tactics, you know me. We're going through the game, through the mechanics. So if you're shouting at your monitor, I apologise. And I think we'll move down. We'll move down Schwerin. Again, he can move 2. 1, 2. We'll plop him on there to bump up his stack a bit. So that's an action point. We have 3 left. I'm not sure if we need them. Do you know what? I think that's it. I think we're going to forego the other 3 action points. I don't think we need those. Right. Okay. Next, whoops. Well, actually here it says recovers and moves their forces. There were no units to recover, and we've moved. Now it says fight battles. So we've got 3 battles to take care of, and what I do is, they're not included in the game or in the rules, but I use my little cubes just to remind me that I've got these battles to do and I don't forget, because you know me, I do. So 3 battles. Now all these battles are against single Saxony units, and a unit, if I've not mentioned it, is about sort of 4,000 to 6,000 men. So there's quite a few attacking Saxony. Now they could they could retreat to sort of maybe consolidate forces here with Rutowski. A retreat, as I say, costs 1 action point, but you're saying, hold on, they're not activated. Saxony hasn't got any action points. Quite right. So they have to pay for those on tick by credit. And we use one of these. We can see it, a retreat marker, which goes on the action point track. And when Austria get activated, they sort of pay it back. And it's the same up here. Do they move back to consolidate? But that will cost them 3 action points they haven't got, and when they get activated they're going to be 3 action points less. But as this is just a sort of, let's show you how this thing plays, what we'll do, we'll have this unit actually retreat just so there's something there with the leader. The leader is on his own there. But that will cost them 1 action point they haven't got. So out comes the old Barclay card, and that goes on there, and they will pay that back when they get activated. So that's that one. Whoops. And they've taken control of Torgau. And it does say in the next part of the procedure of phase to wait until all the battles are done before you put the control markers, but I tend to forget, so these are the little control markers for each nation or alliance, and I'm going to put that there so I don't forget. Excuse me. There we are. Now, that is a fault, but it's not a resource fault, so there is no movement along the resource spaces track. Remember, the idea is to control as many resource spaces, like faults like this and Berlin, to move the track along and to get that alliance's victory conditions. So, this one though, we'll have a battle just to show you what's going on. Be a bit one-sided, but what I'll do is, I'll set them up elsewhere to give us a bit more room and show you how that works. But they give you this handy dandy little active battle token to put on the space there so you don't lose your place and you know where the battle occurred. So let's do that. Okay, off to the battlefield. Here we are on the battlefield, ready to engage each other. There are 2 types of battles. There are field battles and there are fort battles, F-O-R-T. Now this unit did come from a resource fort, Leipzig, so they could either thrash it out on the field, and field battles go on round after round until one side is eliminated or fully retreats, which seems a bit daft because there's 8 units including Fred. Or they could run into the fort and commence a siege. Again, not much hope, but I just want to show you sort of how things work. I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to run into the fort, shut the door, and hope for the best. Now, as it's a resource fort, it then has one of these on it, which says resource fort, 2 units max, plus 2 bonus. That means that up to 2 units can get into the fort, and each unit will get a +2 to their die roll. So if you've got a larger force here, a couple of them could run in to the fort, and the attacking units would not only have to deal with the guys on the field, but then commence a siege. Just to show you, on the other side of the counter is one for normal forts, so you can see only 1 unit's allowed in that, and that unit gets a +1 bonus. Now, unlike field battles, there's only 1 round in a siege, so if Fred doesn't eliminate this Saxony unit straight off, it will have to wait until Prussia gets activated again to try to continue the siege. But that will cost Prussia 1 action point. Now, if you remember here, there are 2 numbers. This is the commander's tactical rating, and this is its leadership value. So 3 would be the die roll modifier, so adding +3 to each die roll, and 8 is the number of units that can use that bonus. Now, if this was a field battle, that would be great because each unit would get a +3. But there is a rule change in that errata sheet which says, in fought battles, besieging commanders do not give a leadership bonus. Besieging units only hit on 6s. So they've just got to throw as is and try and get the magic number of 6. But in all combats, the defenders go first. So 1 die, but with a +2. Let's see if the poor besieged Saxony unit can do some damage. Oh, throws a 5. 5 + 2 is 7. So actually, yes, one of these units is turned over and is depleted. And that does mean it can't take any further part in this battle. But that's it. Now, we get 8 dice. So, 7 dice for Frederick. Luckily, no modifier because of the rule change, but 7 dice nonetheless. 6s we're looking for. Oh dear. Nothing there. Or there. But 1 6. And that gets depleted. Now again, if this was a field battle, that unit would not be able to participate any further in the battle, but because they are in a fort, they can, and so it carries on next time Prussia is activated, because as I say, that is it. Just 1 round. So Frederick did not remove that Saxony unit and has now got to waste time trying to do it next time Prussia is activated. So, back to the map. And there we are. Fred's back in Leipzig with his depleted unit and the depleted unit of the besieged Saxony unit. But that's it for that one. Next, it's just this battle up here. And once again, what I think we'll do is we'll have this unit, the Saxony unit, retreat so they can consolidate their forces. I think historically the poor Saxony nation didn't stand much of a chance, but we'll see how they fare in this game. So, I think what we'll do, we'll just move that unit down. They have retreated. Leowalt gets one of those on Danzig. But that's got to be paid for. So, whoops, that moves up another one. Okay, I think that is it. So what does it say on the old procedure of phase? Marks control of spaces by placing a control marker. Well, we've been a bit cheeky and we've already done that. So the last thing is checks if he may draw tactics cards. Remember, those are the deck of cards off to the side which help each alliance. So in the rules it says obtaining tactics cards at the end of each phase. The active player checks if he can draw cards. And there are certain conditions, and if you fulfill those conditions, you can get a card. So, took control of an enemy fort or resource space. Yep, we took control of Torgau, and Danzig up the top there, both of which are fort spaces. You can also get a card by relieving a siege and clearing all the enemy off, but unfortunately Freddie wasn't successful. Or won a field battle, which we didn't do. We have to be a bit careful with this, because if on certain spaces the enemy retreats without performing a single round of combat, that doesn't entitle you to take a card. So for instance, like 2 city hexes like here, or hit city hex like here, if there's a battle going on and the enemy retreated straight away, the victor wouldn't be allowed to take a card unless it was a fort space, which this isn't. I think that's right. And you can only draw 1 card per space, so if you fulfill 2 or 3 of the conditions, you can't take 3 cards. So we take 2 cards. The decks have been shuffled, believe me, so we'll take from the Prussian Alliance deck, and the first card is, Cavalry Charge. Condition: your opponent has A, declared a retreat, or B, has used a cavalry charge card themselves. Effect: either A, prevents enemy retreat, or B, cancels out the opponent's cavalry charge. Yeah, so if the opponent says, right, I'm retreating, I've had enough, you can play this, and they can't. But if they have one of these in their hand, they can go, yes, I am, and play their one, and that will cancel it out. But you can see here, little number 1, so you've got to have a commander of at least 1 tactical rating, which most of the commanders are. I think there's a couple of zeros. So that's that card. What's next? Rapid Advance. Condition: after rolling to determine your action points. Effect: +2 action points for the phase. Handy. You can use multiples of these cards per phase. Okay. Right, I hope I haven't forgotten anything. I think everybody's done. So we move on and pull another chit. So we'll be right back for that. So here we are ready for the next phase of turn 1. And we take the last chit from the cup, and of course it's the Prussians. First thing we do is check for lines of communication. And I think everything is tickety-boo. They can all trace back to a resource space. So let's roll for action points. Remember, Prussians get their +2. They get a 3. +2 is 5. Now, do we want to play our rapid advance and get an extra 2 action points? Let's have a count up. We've got to spend 1 to pay for the siege. I want to spend 1 to restore this unit. And then can be included in the battle. I want to move maybe Leerwald down to Thorn to attack, and Bevern to attack Dresden. So that's 4. I don't think we want to do anything else. Don't think we're ready to attack Olmütz here. We'll wait and see if we can get Frederick and Bevern moving down, and Leerwald to join them before we do that. But we'll see. No, I think we're okay. I think we've got enough action points. So we'll pay for the siege and restore this unit. Now normally it would have one of these which says recovered but no marching. But it's not going to be marching, it's going to be attacking, I think. So excuse fingers. So that's 2 action points. We're down to 3. And as I said, Bevan's moving down here. Sorry, that's, for 2, and then siege. And that's right, layer walt. Moving down for another 2, which leaves us 1 over. But I don't think we're going to be using that. I think that's it. So it's battles. So the first one we'll do, I think, is going to be old Frederick there. See if he can finish off the siege at Leipzig. Because one thing you don't want to be doing, we look over here, these darker spaces are winter spaces. And during the winter, besieging troops have a hard time of it. So they want to get this siege over as quickly as possible. So we're off to Leipzig. There we are. So let's see how Frederick does this time. So here we are, ready for the next round in the siege. Remember, even though they're depleted, they can still attack and they will get a +2 to their die roll. And remember, the rule change is that in sieges, the besieging units do not get a bonus from their commander. So here we go. Let's see if the Saxony unit can be as successful as last time. No. 3 + 2 is 5. It's a miss. Now we have to throw 8 dice. Here we go. Oh. Those. Nothing. Nothing. But 2 6s. So that is eliminated. And goes on to the Saxony unit reserve box over here. And it gets turned over back to its full strength side. And it may well come on later on in the game. Frederick was successful. There he is, back in Leipzig. And as I say, I put them probably out of phase, but I forget otherwise. So they now control Leipzig. And I must say, the components in this game are lovely, they're outstanding. And I'm not just saying that. The mounted board and the quality of the counters, even the rulebook, the cards, it's lovely. Right, enough of that. Let's try Bevern at Dresden. Right, off to the battlefield. So here we are. We have the much larger forces of Bevern against Rutowski's much smaller army. Again, 3 options. They could retreat, but that would cost another resource point. And to be honest, it's probably pointless. They probably want to hold up the Prussians until the Austrians can get into the game. Field battle, well, as before, there's only 2 units, probably wouldn't last too long. So I think we're going to have another siege. And because we've got 2 units and Dresden is a resource fort, we can, once again, use one of these. And remember, they only get 1 hit, do the attackers. And Bevern cannot use his bonuses, but Rutowski can. They throw first 2 dice with +2 on each one. Here we go. Oh, just the 1. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but once they're in the fort, they can't retreat out back into a friendly space. They can retreat, but they come out of the fort onto the field and a field battle ensues. So I think that's a good option. 8 dice. Sorry, 7 dice. We've got 1 depleted. 7 dice, 6s. Oh! Oops, nothing but 3 6s. So They both get depleted. 1, 2, and this one gets eliminated and goes back onto the unit reserve as full strength. But that's it. That's the end of the siege. Back to the map. And there we are. This is what I like about this game. It's pretty straightforward. I will probably still make mistakes. But now, you see, they've got to use resource points up to recover troops. This is a very sort of to and fro type of game, which goes over a long period of time. It is a long game. It is going to be 5 to 8 hours to play, which is why, as I say, I won't be able to do the whole lot. But that's what makes it interesting. The Prussians get the advantage, then the Austrians push back. You've got the French coming from the south and the Brits from the north. Anyway, there's still a siege. So the last one is up the top there. Old Leowalt up at Thorn. So here we are again. Decisions for the Saxony units. They can retreat, but that will cost, as I say, an action point, and they're going to be using up these action points when the Austrians come in. They won't have so many action points to use. And when the Austrians are drawn from the cup, the action points can be used not only for the Austrians, but for the Holy Roman Empire, for Sweden, and for Saxony, if there's any left. So that has to be borne in mind. So Thorn is just a normal fort. But what I think we'll do is a bit sacrificial. We'll pop 1 into the fort because it's not a resource fort. So 1 unit can go in there and we'll get a +1 bonus. And the other one will stand and fight. Or the other unit. Remember, these are 4,000 to 6,000 troops. A bit outnumbered. But there we go. So first thing we do is conduct the field battle. And this time Leowalt can use his bonuses. He can give a +1 to 4 units, including himself. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I just tend to move them apart like that. The defenders go first. They're throwing 1 die, and it's just a 6. Oh, nearly, but no. Leowalt, 4 dice with a +1. But that gets depleted. Bonk, and eliminated. Back on to the unit reserve. Space for you, mate. Now it's the siege. 1 round of siege. And Saxony go first with 1 die with a +1. Oh, they only do it, look. They knock out one of those. These can't use their bonus now. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And throwing 6s. Oh, no. But look at that. So they are depleted and also eliminated. Back on the unit reserve for you. So success for Leowalt. There are the victors back at Thorn, and a control chit for those. That's all the battles taken care of. And the next thing is says, and I think I've made a mistake here, removes recovery markers from units. So what I should have done is not use that unit in the battle, but I don't think it made a difference. But there we go, remember for next time. So sorry about that. Next, Marks control of spaces by placing control marker. We've done that rather cheekily. And the last thing is checks if he may draw tactics cards. Well, we took control of an enemy fort here and here. Old Bevern still sieging away there. So we can take, I think, 2 cards. Let's see what we get this time. Oh, Scorched Earth. Condition, either A, before your forces march, or B, in step 1 of a winter turn. Effect, choose 1 resource space under your control that was originally your enemy's. Place the Scorched Earth marker on it. The space no longer serves as a resource space or fort. Was a bit drastic. And as it says, there are, we can see it, Scorched Earth markers. Next. Surprise attack. At the start of a battle, your forces attack first. That's handy, but it's got a tactics of 3, so only certain commanders will be able to use that. So there are no more chits in the cup. We are at the end of the turn, and here we have a turn end sequence. Return used and discarded tactics cards to your decks, then reshuffle them, but we didn't use any, so that's okay. Respond to any events and check victory if victory conditions have been met. No. Slide the turn marker along to indicate the start of the next turn and return all the action chits to the cup. And add the chits from the current turn track box, if any. Well, there will be. Right. We've got the Prussians. And over here, we've got a couple of Austrian chits at last. And a turn end chit. So they go in and we move the turn counter along and we're ready for turn 2. Right, I think we'll leave it there. Gone on for quite a while. This is early stages, so there's not much going on. The Prussians are pushing forward, but now the Austrians are in the fight, so we may see it balance out a bit more. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and it's been of use. So if it has, please subscribe. Like the video, push the bell. It'll tell you when I upload other things. Make a comment. Bound to have made some mistakes. Caught one just now with the old recovered markers, but there you go. And as always, a big, big thank you to my subscribers. Thank you so much. So, we're ready in the next video for turn 2. The Austrians are coming in. We'll see how that works out. So until then, you take care and be safe. And goodbye.